Hello and welcome to the Pinstripe Post, a sad Pinstripe Post today. Today is Monday, March 10th. We just got the news. Gerrit Cole, Yankees ace, will be out for the 2025 season. He will undergo Tommy John surgery tomorrow. That is Tuesday. Our greatest fears as Yankees fans have come true as they lose their ace. And we're going to talk about it. We're going to break it all down, what the consequences are, how this is going to affect this Yankee squad, what their actual projections can be this year without Gerrit Cole. We'll discuss it all here on Pinstripe Post. But before I get to any of that, Joel Sherman, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. I was in Arizona until I came home last night. Was there for a week, so the news about Cole began to break there. And look, there is kind of an information superhighway out there, Ryan. And every camp I went to, people would ask me, "What are you hearing?" But they also were hearing the worst. So I guess official news has to come at some point. But I think from the moment this became an issue for the second straight year, there was a clear path that this was on. And the thing to remember now is the Yankees do not only lose Gerrit Cole for the 2025 season, but they probably lose him for about half of the 2026 season. So with 4 years left on his contract, then we should probably talk about those 4 years at
Yeah.
some point. A year and a half of that goes away, and there'll be 2.5 years left on the contract. And that's always, of course, the concern with any player, but specifically a pitcher. Once you do the long-term deal, is like if you were betting today, you hope it doesn't happen to somebody like Freed or Corbin Burns in Arizona or Blake Snell in Los Angeles. But like the reality is, most pitchers who work a heavy workload eventually have to face this crisis. Like it's a miracle when somebody doesn't. Like, I mean, Clayton Kershaw and Max Scherzer have never had Tommy John surgery. That's more stunning than guys who pitch 800, 1,000 plus innings and need it. So, yeah, for you guys who are Yankee fans, it's obviously a big hit, but probably one you've been bracing for about 48, 72 hours.
100%. And Joel, this really all stems from last year, right? Like when he had the nerve inflammation and he went to go see Dr. Neil Elitrosh to figure out if it was actually a torn UCL or what exactly was going on in the elbow. He was able to rest and rehab and work his way back last season. They missed him for the first couple of months, but this is different. You're like you just put it out. He's going to be gone all of 2025, half of 2026 if all goes well with the surgery and rehab. But I do want to start there with what happened last year. This felt like, Joel, from a lot of Yankees fans' perspective, a ticking time bomb because elbows are, you know how it goes, and especially in this sport, they can go at any moment. And when you already have a precursor like he did last year, it was a little, I don't want to say shadow games being played, but we didn't know exactly what was going on in the elbow. And then you hear the nerve inflammation, but it gets you nervous because you're like, but wait a second, could he still need Tommy John in the future? Like, what's the deal with the UCL? And now, all off season, you addressed it after Juan Soto. You signed Max Fried. He opted out of his contract, right? In the off season, he chose to opt out. Then the Yankees said, "Well, we're not going to exercise that extra year on the clause." So they go back and Gerrit Cole says, "All right, I'm not opting out. I'll just take the rest of the 4 years here on my contract." This situation, the way it was laid out, it feels funny, Joel. I'm not going to lie to you, but I just want to get your perspective on this and how the Yankees handle this because signing Free to an 8-year deal, we're like, okay, what do the Yankees know? Because you're saying you're pivoting from Juan Soto, but also Gerrit Cole has that elbow injury from last year that we can't forget about. And he did the whole opt out game, but he's still only playing with the 4 years. I don't know, man. Can you just lay it out there? Like, am I crazy to read into the situation like this?
Well, I mean, I would think if the Yankees at 100% knew that his elbow was about to blow up, they wouldn't have just for shits and giggles, gone back with it. I would not ignore that you have to exist in the real world. And at the time they accept him back, they're negotiating with Juan. They want to negotiate to keep Juan Soto a Yankee. He's represented by Scott Boras, who also represents Gerrit Cole. He also represents Blake Snell and Corbin Burns. So, it's a delicate little world that everybody lives in. Everybody will say one client has nothing to do with the other client, but here in the real world, human beings make decisions on this. Uh, I would say probably that the fact that the Yankees at this time last year, which was still, I think, short of the news that Cole had an elbow problem, I think we all would have said it's a foregone conclusion that they're just going to give him another 36 million and not let him get
Right.
back into the market. He's coming off arguably his best season. He's just won the AL Cy Young in 2023. The fact that the Yankees allowed the possibility that he would go into the Wild probably was an indicator that they had some concerns. It's an interesting sliding door moment in their history, right? Because the order of it you had properly, which is he opts out, they say no. At the moment they say no, he's a free agent. Now that lasted very short. There's some fog of war. Did they agree to extend the deadline a little longer? But the fact that Gerrit Cole, proud union man who fights for every penny for every player, didn't go out in the marketplace also. Now, again, he lives in Connecticut. He seems to love being a Yankee. Maybe he didn't want to risk leaving New York. This is where he wants, or he's like looking at it and says, "Who's going to give me the money? The Angels?" Like he might not have liked some of that possibility, but the reality is, the Yankees said no to an extra year, and Cole said no to going out in free agency and finding out what his worth was. So maybe they were both indicating that there was at least a red light on, if not a four alarm blaze. But, I could have told you that red light is on. He's 33, 34 years old. He's just under 2,000 innings for the regular season. I think it's over that with the postseason. He's a more traditional workhorse than almost anyone else who's pitching. The other guy who was like him in baseball and much younger, Sandy Alcantara, already needed Tommy John surgery. So it always just feels like a date. And when that date is, unemotionally, you could say, what the Yankees should have done is said, we got the 5 years out of him. When you sign the 9-year contract, you're signing it for the first 5 or 6 years. Like you recognize that he's probably worth more than 36 million a year for those first few years, and it's going to go down and down, and you live with it because you want him to take championship runs early. And emotionally, you could say, okay, he's out the door. And if he's out the door, look, I'll play the game further. I write about it for Post Plus tomorrow if you want to read what the sliding doors. I think they would have, who knows if they would have gotten him. So aggregate fucks are here, right? Like, who knows if they would have gotten him. But they loved Willie Adames.
Hmm.
So like one of the reasons they didn't do anything early was they felt they didn't have the money for too much if they were able to if they were going to keep Soto. So they didn't do anything until they knew the exact price Soto would cost or not cost once he didn't do it. But if they're out of 36 million short term on Cole and 144 million long term, would they have said, okay, like even as a sign to Juan Soto, if one of the things you're thinking is Steve Cohen's always going to go for it, we're going to sign, like, we're not bringing back Cole, but we're going to sign Adames. And, Adames will be in the lineup with you and Judge. He'll play third base, etc. It's like, they really liked Willie Adames. Could they have convinced him to come to play third base? Who knows? But like, if they had 36 million extra at the beginning of the offseason, I think it's certainly something they would have tried to do. To your point, once Soto leaves, I think by then Adames is already off the board.
The
So
Giants, yeah.
so if he's not off the board, I think they probably stare into the abyss and say, should we spend the big money on Fried or Adames? I think once Adames is off the board, they say, okay, let's go kind of fully run prevention here. Better defenders with Bellinger and Goldschmidt, etc., and try to play that way. But um,
Well, the
yeah,
other fear I have,
like
Joel, with if Cole goes out to free agency, right, and the Yankees say, okay, you want to opt out, you opt out. Is there a possibility that someone would have seen on his physical, his elbows are taking time bomb? It's
yeah.
ready to blow. Like
On,
we
on the
can't take the risk.
On the other hand, I know what everybody remembers is the fifth inning of the World Series game where you do a lot of pitchers. The last thing we had seen before that is the best lineup in baseball. He had no hit for 4 innings
Right.
going into the fifth inning. So again, it's like very easy 2020 hindsight to say there's something going on with his elbow, except for if Aaron Judge catches a fly ball, he maybe's carrying a no hitter through 5 innings of game five. The Yankees are flying cross country for game six, and nobody thinks, oh, his elbow's about to blow up. Who knows what else he might have done that night. He probably would have gotten to 7, 8, and like he ended up throwing 45, 50 pitches that inning.
Yep.
And amazingly, they sent them back out again. So who knows what even happened that night? So, it's just so hard. I don't know if this is going to make sense, Ryan. But one of the things I have asked a lot of questions about this spring is clearly one of the things all teams, at least all forward-thinking teams that have put the money there on sports science are doing, is trying to figure out how to have 2% fewer injuries, 5% fewer, like the advantage of figuring it out. And that they're recognizing that there's something on such a small level that's not the full ligament, that's not bone, that's not muscle, that is going on in guys' elbows. And can they get to the bottom of the elbow that's more likely to hold up over the one that doesn't? And
Mm.
whoever gets there first is, if you they do get there, and there are teams who believe we will get there, uh, they're gonna have a advantage. So like how deep into Gerrit Cole's elbow would you have had to go to know that it's just about to pop? And maybe it was a pristine elbow. He really did just have nerve damage. And then he threw a pitch this spring and it was bad. Like, so I'm just I
Yeah,
know we
I
live in a
hear you.
conspiratorial age, but I don't think the Yankees wanted to give $144 million in charity. I'm sure that there was an exit physical given to the guy that sh probably showed his elbow in good shape. Otherwise, even he would he have just gone out to the mound this spring if his elbow wasn't in good shape? I don't know.
I
Maybe.
don't know.
I'm just not a conspiracy theory guy.
Okay. Yeah, it was just something that again a lot of fans had pointed out that the whole opt out and the way that he could have opted out and he chose again. I'm just going to stick with the contract I have. It raised some red flags considering what we knew about it last year. All
But
right,
let
but
me can I throw a
yeah,
question back at you then,
for
Ryan? If
sure.
you were the general manager of the team last year and you did not have a medical that showed that he was a complete time, you had what you knew. He had had his first kind of serious injury as a Yankee, and his first probably serious injury since he had been a Pirate to his arm. And all you had was that, but the last thing you saw him do was dominating the Dodgers before the
Hmm.
team and him fucked up around it. Otherwise, like maybe he's a hero of the World Series. And he says, screw it. I don't want to leave. I'll do it for 4 at 144. If you were the general manager, would you have walked away from that? Like,
Oh
would you
no,
have done
absolutely not.
better in the marketplace? So that's what I'm saying is like it's a tough spot, even if you're not playing the Boris game or something else, is they probably thought, well, over the next 4 years, is he likely to miss time in his mid to late 30s? Yes, but we don't have anything that says he's a clear ticking time bomb.
No, no, and Joel, I think that's why again I highlighted the pivot to Max Fried. I think Fried was the insurance in case Cole did get hurt because I think you tell me, Joel, and Joel, you pointed out the athletic staff, the athletic the sports science, and how they try to prevent injuries for these guys. I think Brian Cashman's a smart guy. I think he understands. Listen, that was a scary moment there where we thought we lost Gerrit Cole in an all-in Juan Soto World Series year, right? But now we pivoted. We got Max Fried, a guy who can be an ace and is good at run prevention, and we believe in him. That's our insurance policy. That was a smart move. That was a smart move. But it's the other things that we could talk about later in the episode with the lineup and other things that they didn't address with the Giancarlo Stanton thing that you did know in the playoffs last year with his elbows. I got to talk about and ask you now, though, the impact this does have on this Yankee squad in 2025. They had high aspirations this year. Obviously, going to the World Series last year, falling short of your goals, but you made it to the World Series last year. This year, they pivoted. We've highlighted plenty the guys they brought in. How does this impact now 2025, though, when you don't have your workhorse, a rare breed in Major League Baseball? He's a luxury, Joel, in what Cole does, and be able to give the ball every fifth day and give you 5 to 6 or 7 innings no matter what. And he's going to bulldog his way through it. What are they going to miss here for the 2025 and probably for half of 2026?
Well, there's no sugarcoating it. Uh, Even if he was 85 or 90% of Gerrit Cole, you're starting from a mountaintop. So that's going to be a 3.5 ERA and 175 really good innings. And a guy you could give the ball to in any ballpark, anytime, etc. There's no way to sugarcoat it. On the other hand, I would remember that going into the World Series last year, the advantage that was perceived for the Yankees was a starting pitching advantage over the Dodgers. The Dodgers were essentially down to 2.5 starters. Like, and they had no idea. Like, Yamamoto was kind of messed up. Walker Bueller was messed up. Jack Flaherty was messed up. Those were their three starters. Like, you want to say
Mhm.
those three were 2.5? Fine, but they didn't feel great about it. And they they were punting playoff games with bullpen games just to rest guys and get to it. So I know you could win a World Series with less because I just watched the Dodgers do it. The flip side of that is the Dodgers had an exceptional lineup, they had an exceptional bullpen, and they defended well. And so, will the Yankees have an exceptional lineup? Will they defend well? And will they have a good bullpen? They can have all of those things. I think the bigger crisis moment for the Yankees, and again, I'm not sugarcoating this. This is a crisis moment. They have two of their best starters. The other guy won the. We haven't even really discussed Luis Healy won Rookie of the Year, and I think on our show last week I said if everyone was fully healthy and it was a three-man rotation for a playoff series, he would start one of those three games. Like his stuff is spectacular.
And
But the
he was the
problem
reason they
becomes
were able to get past the Cole injury last
yes,
year,
he
primarily.
pitched like Cole. He pitched like Cole
Yes.
for those 2.5 months, which is how he won Rookie of the Year. So, but the problem for me, for the Yankees concern now is Clark Schmidt is an off injured guy. Max Fried has had his season shut down each of the last 2 years because of forearm stuff. Stroman has fallen apart in the second half. And one of the miracles of last year for the Yankees is Rodon made it through because he's an off injured guy. And so now you have the four guys who you're counting on. If you told me each of those guys made 25 to 28 starts, I still think the Yankees win the AL East.
Wow.
But like, I wouldn't bet on that.
Mm.
You know, I wouldn't. I don't know if you remember the column I wrote during the Stroman controversy when he said, "I'm a starting pitcher, not a reliever. I'm not a reliever." I said, "Yeah, Aaron Boone's never going to have to make this decision. They'll be lucky, right? If he has to, he's going
Yes.
to start. He's going to start. They're an injury probably away from him starting freaking opening day. Like,
That's
so
crazy.
so the season is going to twist and turn. They suddenly, when you consider that on their roster, including Cole, I think it's like three of the 11 highest paid free agent contracts in history for a starting pitcher. Rodon, Fried, and Cole are three of the, like, if it isn't 11, it's 12, it's 13. They're three of the highest ones ever, which is always interesting because I always get to hear how cheap Hal Steinbrenner is. But uh, they have three of those. They have those three plus that probably an overpay on Stroman,
Yeah.
right? Because they can't trade the contract,
Nope.
uh, and yet they're going to be short starting pitching. And I think they're in the marketplace from now to July 31st to try to fix it. I think that they gotta hope that Will Warren takes a Luis Heel like jump and, like he doesn't have to win Rookie of the Year, but
No.
I do think the Yankees will have a nice 1-9 lineup. I think they will defend better. They traditionally have good bullpens. Can he be a 4.3 ERA guy and give them 5 to 6 innings with some? Can 7 or 8 out of 10 of his starts be games the Yankees could win when he's leaving? That's his job. Like if he does more than that, like Heel did last year, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great. But that's asking a lot in back-to-back seasons to get that kind of thing. And look, a little of this is can you survive in advance? One of the success stories of last year was while Cole was out, not only did Hill pitch great, all five guys pitched really well, and they went round and round. And almost at the moment Cole went out, Schmidt went out. So like they ended up just keep using the same six guys over and over again. Warren got snuck in there a little. I think Cody Petit made starts, but like 152 of the 62 games were started by the six guys you'd want to start the games. If the Yankees are in a situation where the five guys who are going to start the season and Luis Heel and whatever mystery guest they're going to add between now and July 31st start 152 of 162 games, I think they're fine. The problem is there's still 3 weeks of spring training left in 162 games, and I don't like the physical history of the other four guys, veterans who you're counting on. And so, and just I would throw in one other thing. I think signing Freed was there was a it was not a major point, but one of the points I think was, oh, we get to de-emphasize Rodon a little more,
Yeah.
and maybe the less you ask of him, the more you get. Well, now with Call out, you got to turn to Rodon and say, dude, got to make 30 starts, you got to throw 180 innings, you got to be good. I don't know temperamentally that's the guy I'd want to throw that all on, but I think that's where they are right now.
I mean, it's not even. I mean, spot on, Joel, with Rodon. Rodon. They got to rely on Marcus Stroman now. He has to
Yep.
somewhat be relevant here for the first at least 3 months of the season until Luis Hill comes back, because you need those innings to be eaten up and you need him to give quality start. I will say Marcus Stroman did have one of the worst defenses playing behind him. I was diving the stats. If the Yankees defense is better, like we've been saying in this offseason, and they're preaching that they're better defensively, it should help out Stroman a little bit. I mean, I know the analytics weren't great with the home runs given up at home in Yankee Stadium, but you're counting on him. And the health is always the biggest question mark here with this Yankee squad, and it is reared its ugly head this entire spring training.
And can I throw in one other thing,
Yeah,
Ryan? Because it's a topic since we've started doing the show. I mean, the show is called Pinstripe Post, right? You're a Yankee fan and you're asking me questions. So we are very obviously laser focused on the Yankees. And you could get myopia. And again, like I was on Cole, I am not here to sugarcoat it. The worst spring training that any team has had in the major leagues this year belongs to the Yankees. Like they've had the most damaging. It's two starters. They were going to have trouble from the right side hitting this year. They've lost two righty bats. Now, could you have believed in LeMahieu? Who knows? But Stanton clearly was going to hit in the middle of the lineup. They've lost a couple of relievers. They've lost depth starters. JT Brubaker fractured his ribs. Hampton, who's one of their better prospects, who they're hoping maybe June, July, he becomes a factor, or they could use him in a trade to go get what they want. They have had nothing but pretty much shit happen to them since the beginning of it. But the Mets have also lost two starters. The Red Sox have lost two starters this spring. This is not for the season, but they're going to open it, and they're worrisome injuries. Brian Bellows' shoulder, Cutter Crawford's knee. They're both mysteries for like when are they coming back, whatever. The Orioles just lost Grayson Rodriguez and Andrew Kittredge, two of their guys who were going to be important guys on their pitching staff. Rodriguez in the rotation. So injuries hit everyone. They have hit the Yankees the hardest. And the key issue now is there's nothing you can do about this. Is they need it to stop. If it stops, again, I think they're not sugarcoating it. Losing Cole and Hill are killers, but they're not death if it stops now. And I'm always reminded, Buck Showalter had a saying that I really loved. When something like this would happen, he'd go, well, they're not going to stop the season for us till we're healthy again. We're going to play again tomorrow. So we better figure out what to do about this. And so the Yankees have to figure out what to do about this. Is this offense? More offense? I don't think it's a good sign that they're down a couple of relievers already. Now, maybe Jake Cousins, I believe, is already throwing, so maybe that one won't be long. They probably weren't counting a ton on Scott Efros. Maybe they weren't counting a ton on Tyler Matzik. It's actually three relievers they're down if Matzik was going to be the second lefty in the bullpen. But like at this point, if they could just stop the bleeding. But one of the reasons the Yankees are always high up on the injury front, if you do not believe in just general incompetence, they suck, they don't know what they're doing, whatever the thing is usually when you're built around older players who have a lot of mileage, you're getting guys with track record. It means that there is also more wear on the tire. And the one that you look at here now is Judge is 33. He had 700 plate appearances last year. Maybe he's going to have 700 plate appearances again this year, but he has been an injured player before. And we saw what happened in 23 with the Yankees. If suddenly he has an extended injury where that kind of spins off into
yeah.
the universe.
I
So,
mean, some of
so
the big injuries for Judge, I will say, freak
are
injuries, running
freaky. He
into the
got hit by
wall,
a
get hitting that
pitch.
pitch. Yeah, like
Yes. Yeah. But he's 6'8". There's a
100%.
lot
He's
going
going to
on
DH
there.
a lot this year with Stanton being out for a while, right? Like
Yes.
that's your
Yep.
expectation, I would assume.
I
He'll
would
be the
assume.
primary
Yep.
DH for a while.
Yep. But all I'm saying is like he becomes so important.
Oh,
Like last year you had Soto,
he
right?
was
If you're the
important
Yankees.
before the Cole injury, I would
Yeah.
argue, Joel.
Right.
Like it
Yeah.
was so heightened on Judge already. It's like, hey, we need you to be MVP Judge for us
No
this year
doubt.
because,
But I do think there is still a very good team here.
yeah,
They've got to stop the bleeding. And it's just not the history of this group of players to stop the bleeding. So, but there is a lot of this all over the place. Like George Kirby just went down with a shoulder in Seattle. It's happening everywhere. As you know, I'm sure the highest frequency of pitching injuries by far are March and April and early May. As guys ramp back up. And again, sports science is working on this like crazy. One of the things sports science came up with is maybe let's keep our arm working all off
I
season.
yeah,
Gerrit
throw
Cole, Gerrit Cole literally did that. So again, I think if he was a hurt player, would he have kept his arm working all off season? It had to feel good enough where he didn't say, "Hey, I better shut this down for a while, go whatever." He kept it going all off season, and he broke because I think pitchers break.
yeah, and Joel, I do want to ask you, and this is the big one. So when I got the first, when Cole, was going for the imaging, I thought in my head, I'm like, okay, not good. If it is Tommy John, not great. But I pivoted in my head and I said, this doesn't mean the season's over. This doesn't mean that the Yankees World Series aspirations are over. Why? Because again, I don't think the AL is very strong. I think the Yankees still have a very good team. But I also thought back in the history of recent MLB World Series winners, the Dodgers lost Shohei Ohtani as a pitcher. They lost Tyler Glass now as a pitcher. The Texas
Again, they
Rangers
were
lost
down to
Jacob.
2.5 starters
Right,
in the World Series. Like they didn't have a lot. And by the way, the Yankees won the AL East last year without Cole. Like
right,
their best of their season, where they built their kind of lead and built like the solid cornerstone to their season, was those first 2.5 months was the best they played all year.
right. And I look back at the Texas Rangers when they won Jacob DeGrom. They lost him for the year. There's prime examples recently that you can lose your ace, right? Even if he is a workhorse and a rare breed, and Gerrit Cole, you can lose to someone like that, and you could still
Rays
put
went to
together
the
a.
playoffs after losing Shane McClanahan,
You
and
can do it.
also Rasmussen in Springs. And by the way, they did that on a $75 million payroll. They
I
did it.
I
So
still think this team can make the playoffs. However, the golden goose question is, Joel, with the Stanton injury not looking promising, which again I want to talk to you at the end of this episode about, the Gerrit Cole out for the year, Luis Gil's going to miss 3 months. Be honest with me, Joel. Is this a World Series winning team?
well, I don't know the answer to that because like there's going to be more injuries, more surprises, a July trade deadline. Like do one of the themes of our shows so far this spring training is what I always say, there is stuff that's happening in spring training that matters, but who knows what it is. Like last year, Luis Heel pitched really well in spring training. I think this is the example we used last week. Heel
Mm-hmm.
pitched really well in spring training. It turned out that was real. Anthony Volpe made swing changes and looked great in spring training. It didn't hold for a whole season. So who knows? But for example, Austin Wells looks great
Yeah.
right now. Well, if he's a 30 homer catcher, that covers so many sins. So many sins. If you have an advantage here, it's like what I give you an insight. I was in Padre camp. Padres are really lacking in depth everywhere. But their first 15 players, I would put up against the Dodgers. That's how, like, when you're talking about Merrill and Machado and Tatis and King and Cease and Darvish and Swat, like except like they've got really whatever. And one of the things is go look at the 15 starting center fielders in the National League. I think Jackson Merrill is going to be like last year was no fluke. I think that guy has everything you'd want in a baseball player. I think he's going to be a great player. Who's the second best center fielder in the National League? Maybe it's like Michael Harris. There's going to be then like it's a like will Pete Crow Armstrong grow or whatever.
Right.
It's not like a strong position. I was reminded. I've thought about this for 25 years because the Mets of the late 90s and early 2000s when they were good. One of the reasons they were good was Mike Piazza probably began every game with 300 points of OPS on whoever the other catcher was minimum, and it just covers a lot. And it's one of the places you create a gap. Catching is not strong in the sport. If the Yankees have a huge advantage of most days like catching. If this is Wells, in other words, like what we saw for that like 8 week period where he became the cleanup hitter before he kind of got tired and fell apart at the end. If he sustains that for a year, that's one of the ways you get better, right? Freed picks up some of the weight here. Devin Williams and Luke Weaver turn into like 6 outs, try to beat the Yankees. There is a pathway, and if they're in it, they'll go get a thing or 3 in July to go for it. They understand the timeline they're dealing with Judge's age, etcetera.
Do they?
So,
I hope so.
I think they do. I mean, you know, they like I always say, go look, I understand what the narrative is
Yeah.
on the Yankees. I understand that. And I would argue that Hal should spend more. And I have. I wrote a piece last week that I thought he should spend a little more. But again, he has 3 of the top 11 free agent starting pitcher contracts of all time. He traded for more money in one trade than anyone ever has when they acquired Stanton. At the moment they signed the contract, Judge is the highest paid per year position player in history. I, they have traded more prospects over the last 4 years than any other team by a pretty good amount,
Yeah.
right?
And most of those prospects have been garbage. I got you,
Have
Joel.
been
And
garbage,
they've done, but
but
here's
you
the thing.
have to trade it, and it begins to lessen your coffers. And as we saw, I think again, this is a problem for the Yankees this season moving forward. I thought they were crafty in the offseason. They use a major league player in
Mhm.
all 3 of their big trades. To get Bellinger, Cruz, and Williams, there's a major league player in that. That's because their farm system is A, depleted from a lot of trades, and B, took a big step backwards in performance and injury last year. Are we seeing the beginning of it moving forward again? Is George Lombard what you watched in spring training a real thing? Is Everson Pereira is what you've seen in spring training a real thing? Spencer Jones seems to have made some swing adjustments. Is that a real thing? That will change what their arc of what they could get in July. If it is. If not, that's tougher because like I know like I have friends of mine who freaking won't stop texting right now who are Yankee fans and like they just want Sandy Alcantara on the team tomorrow. And I'm like, what I'll say to all of them is, every team would try to get Sandy Alcantara. You know what? Most of the teams have better prospects than the Yankees. So, like, once that player gets out into the wild, whether it's him, it's Dylan Cease, it's Kevin Gosman, take your guy. The Yankees will then have to win for the guy.
Yeah,
Uh,
but here and this is the flip side from the Yankees perspective, Joel. We know that window is so tight and so small, and it's gotten so much tighter now and so much smaller now
but is it?
because of the Judge age, because of the Stanton injury, because of the Cole injury. You are now hyper focused on 2025. Goldschmidt's this is a 1 year deal for him, right? You got Devin Williams; he's going to be a free agent. They have built this team to be a World Series winning team this year, and
Yeah, no doubt.
it has gotten
But they've
it has
kept the
gotten
window open for 3 decades. Like, I wouldn't
but
just
you could
assume
argue though
the
the way they've approached the previous deadlines. I agree with you. This offseason was different. It felt they actually went strong and smart the right way this offseason. But the last couple of deadlines have been duds for Brian Cashman, and he has not added talent and not gone for it. And chances that, and I know you go,
Jazz
Ryan,
Chisholm was their second best player down the stretch last year.
but you didn't add another bat that they needed though, and you didn't
But
add
but
an
who was that? But again, you can't go to the bat store. The bat has to be available and within the reason of what your prospect base will allow you to get. If you show me the guy that they definitively should have gotten at the deadline last year, I would say, okay, let's have a discussion about that. But they did try to like make check marks in boxes that they needed. They got Chisholm to add an infield bat, recognizing they were short left-handed, they were short an infield bat. Was there a I think they made a run at Tommy Edman. The Dodgers, that somehow the Dodgers mind melded the White Sox. I can't explain how bad a trade the White Sox made. I can't explain it. I don't know how the Dodgers got into that trade. They ended up with Kopech and Edman. Go look at what they gave up. It wasn't really impressive if a team looks at your prospects and they don't know that shit is shit,
right.
then you're at it. They did make a run at trying to get Edman, who would be such an important player for him
Yep.
if they have it. He's such a kind of Swiss Army knife, help you in every way. I saw it. I was at Dodger camp the other day, and I'm just like, he's playing center field. They might send the kid Kim down, who they just signed from Korea. He'll just go play second base if they do that. I, but I think they made a run at it. And the White Sox, it was a White Sox Cardinal thing. I don't know how the Dodgers got in. They did, because there was all that talk of are the Yankees going to trade Nestor Cortez for
Yeah.
Edman,
Yeah. I remember
right?
you
I
reporting that. I remember you
like
reporting that.
like there are 30 teams trying. The stores aren't just open for the Yankees. Uh there wasn't and and the day the Yankees didn't get Tommy Edman, I don't think every Yankee fan was like, "Oh, how do you not get Tommy Edman?" Kind of thing. It's you can only get what's in the marketplace. And you know, and you can only get what your prospect base allows. The Yankees prospect base is not a strong prospect base. Now, again,
So
we could blame the Yankee administration. Why aren't
right,
you doing better at all this? The reality is, I think the Yankees had the third most players in the major leagues last year of any team for like who signed their first contract. So the Yankees put a shitload of players into the majors. The problem is they haven't put a lot of excellence into the majors, and yet everyone still keeps trading for their players.
right.
Brian Cashman has done a great job of convincing a marketplace that shit is better than shit, and he gets to make trades. And for a guy who's done this for 30 years, there's not a lot of times where he's been bitten by these trades. Should he have been bolder? Like, should he have given up Volpe or Dominguez a couple of years ago for Luis Castillo? Who knows? Like, no, but I think in real time, if anybody would have told a Yankee fan the cost is Dominguez or Volpe before we saw them play in the major leagues, most Yankee fans would have said, "Don't do that."
Mm. Yeah, I think there's a lot of revisionists that we can go through with all the trades. It just that's why I asked you: is this World Series window closing? Can they win a World Series this year? Maybe it's too early to even talk about it, but it's just what a lot. It's on the mind of a lot of Yankees fans, and I am discouraged when I see people say season's over. It's like, guys, the games haven't even started. We haven't even
But
played
this
the
is but this
162.
is the world, right? Like we're trapped into this cyberspace online thing where being the biggest asshole has its advantages. You
Yeah,
get to scream the loudest. If you're most negative, you win. Uh the Yankees have been really good for like 32, 33 straight years. My suspicion is they'll figure this out and be really good again. Is there a pathway to 77 wins? Yeah. Yeah. Like they're another starting pitching injury or two away from real catastrophe. They're a Judge injury away from whatever.
oh
But
yeah,
like at some point, the Mariners are really trying to win. I was with their example. They're really trying to win.
spent
They're
$0 this offseason.
they're really trying to win. They'll tell you that they're good. They've missed the playoffs by one game in 3 of the last 4 years. They're the only team in the sport that's never played in a World Series. They've been in the playoffs once since 2001. They'll tell you to your face they're really trying, and they think they can win the World Series. And so, like, I do know, again, you get myopic. Met fans are like, "Oh, we don't have enough starting pitching. These two guys got hurt." Red Sox fans are now worried about their starting pitching. The Oriole fans are going nuts. I thought the new owner was going to spend money. Wasn't this the thing? Like the new David Rubenstein took over. He's incredibly rich, worth several $billion. He's going to do it. Really? Charlie Morton and Sugano from Japan, two older right-handed starters. That was the plan? And overpaying for Tyler O'Neill to play the outfield and letting Santander go to do that? Like, that's what's going on in Baltimore. I know that Yankee fans don't see that
Right?
because
No,
they're just
I see it though, but again,
laser focused. I'm talking about writ large,
yeah,
about
yeah, I
like
got
like
you.
like like the points are scored by saying everything sucks, right? Like
I
nobody
don't
no
believe in that theory though. I'm just telling you that that's how some people are, and I don't agree with that.
Yeah,
With
some
my
people some people are gonna say steak tastes like shit. Like what are you gonna do? Uh, like there is no 100% of whatever. The Yankees have hit a real. There, how many times have I used? I'm not sugarcoating it. There is a pathway to 76 wins here. Uh, History suggests that isn't what's going to happen, but they've taken if you and I sat 4 weeks ago before spring training started and said where can the Yankees least afford to take hits, one would be starting pitching depth, the other would be right-handed bats, and they've taken body blows in both areas with 3 weeks to go in spring training, and it isn't like they have easy answers internally for any of it. So could they be in trouble? Yeah, but there's still a lot of really good players on this team, and a lot of track record that they know how to navigate the season, right? The Braves, I feel the same way a little about the Braves, right? The Braves just lost their starting catcher. Their catching depth is really bad. If you would have said to The Braves, where do you not want to have an injury? Catcher. They lost their starting catcher for at least probably most of April. They're not beginning the season without Acuna and Strider, and they're in that Luis Heel survive and advance thing. Can we kind of keep up with the Mets and the Phillies while that's going on? Try to get everyone healthy, and you know what happens. The second Acuna and Strider get healthy, if they get healthy, if they perform post injury like they did pre injury, somebody else will get hurt. Somebody
Absolutely.
else will perform poorly. Just like
Absolutely.
the baseball season.
It's the nature of the
The
beast.
Yankee institution, for as much kind of body blows as it takes, does know how to roll out a regular season winner.
Yeah, no, you're right, Joel. Again, and the Braves, I think, are a better example than I think what you said. The other teams with the Red Sox and the Orioles, the Mets, you could say it's just that World Series aspiration this year. I know what you're saying. The Mariners think they can win. They haven't won, and they haven't been there yet, and they haven't gotten to the playoffs or the World Series recently. So that's why I again, we're highlighting the Yankees. This is what we know as fans. There's not many years left of Aaron Judge
Let,
being MVP. There's not many
so
years
so
left of Gerrit Cole being Gerrit Cole. So now that we've lost one of those big pieces, that window feels really closed right now. And now, as the season is about to begin, like you said, there is a pathway. There's a pathway to 76 wins, but there's also a pathway to maybe 90 plus wins. They scratch across all these games. They're grinding out games. The lineup does it well. The young players perform well. You know, Wells becomes an actual player. Volpe finally becomes something in year 3. Jason Dominguez gives you a nice left field presence in the lineup. And maybe you become the AL East champion that you hoped you could be, and you make a run in the playoffs. I am not saying it's going to happen one way or the other. It's just it's glaring how it's all come crumbling down here, possibly in like a week or 2 weeks. You know?
I didn't read it, but I will because I read everything Jason Stark writes. I didn't have time, but I could tell from the headline and what he put on social media that he wrote today about how will this Philly group be remembered if they don't cash it in and win a World Series. In a lot of ways, like say these last 5 years have been like the Yankees' last 5 years. They did get to a World Series, but they've won a lot of games. They've fallen short, and as I was going around, one of the things I do when I go around spring training, I do ask in each camp, I say, like, what do you have projection wise? Like every team does projections with their own computer stuff. And like the models do not, they have the Mets, Phillies, and Braves close. But the thing they don't like about the Phillies is I think they have 6 or 7 players 32 or older in their everyday lineup. Nola and Wheeler have a ton of innings on it. Their key relievers have been heavily used the last few years. Matt Strom's hurt already, right? And so that's the Philly team, who, by the way, has the third largest payroll in the major leagues. Dodgers, Mets, Phillies, Yankees. We've got to take the Dodgers off the board. They got a $400 million payroll. Their second 11 pitchers are better than just about everybody's first 11, and they're all on the injured list, right? The Mets have a couple of starters out. Nimmo's limping around. They just lost their catcher, a place they couldn't afford to really take a hit. They just lost their catcher for 2 months. That's the second largest payroll. Philly's the third. Padres are still up at 200 million. They have no depth. Like, there are no perfect teams, and everybody's taking on some water, and every team has a pathway to 80 wins. The good teams also have a pathway to 92 to 94. And the Yankees have some, and like the Braves, the Yankees and Braves have history of figuring out the regular season and getting there. So I wouldn't bet against the Yankees. Uh, and I wouldn't sugarcoat that this has been a horseshit 3 weeks.
This is some therapy session you're giving me here, Joel. So
It's been a terrible 3 weeks because it's a lot of injuries and it's to the injury. Like, if
it's to
I'm trying to think,
so the Luis Heel, right? The Luis Heel factor, I think, is really what's putting this a real huge damper on this, right?
yes, if
So
he's healthy right now, you feel a different way. If he's
I
healthy,
feel a
you're
completely
still
different way.
possibly talking about trading Stroman,
Yep.
right? Like if he were healthy. Uh, Instead, he's not. And this is, I think, somewhat similar injury to Clark Schmidt, and Clark Schmidt came back and pitched pretty well when he did. They have to help that there's 3 strong months in Hill from July 1st on, or whenever he's going to be back. They when it comes to starting pitching, they're on the teeter a little. I expect you're going to see some guys start some games this year for the Yankees, which if I had told you 3 weeks ago, like Eric Leal is going to start a game
Oh
or
God.
Brett Hedrick is going to start a game, you'd say, who? But then again, I would encourage you to go look at like who started games for the Dodgers last
Yeah,
year, like this is the season.
this
It's
is the
the
season.
Yankees actually were remarkably for not having Cole
They were great last year.
for 2.5 months, they were remarkably healthy in their rotation, which is maybe why you're seeing since they pitched the seventh month, are we seeing some of the ramifications of the seventh month right now?
So you've hinted at the outside help. Is there names out there that you think the Yankees could potentially? Is it just we're waiting for that waiver? That kind of that the waiver thing that you talked about before spring training ends. Are they looking for guys they could pick up? Towards the end of spring training that have already been built up, and hey, we can give them a start every 5 days or so. Or is this more of we're going to go into the season with what we got, just like with the lineup, and we'll address the bat and the pitcher at the closer to the deadline?
I think the Yankees will have a bat by the end of spring training is my suspicion. They're looking. Um, Starting pitching is hard to find. Here's a problem for the whole sport, and the Yankees are at the front of the list for having this problem because they need starting pitching. The teams that are bad because they have very little to trade. Colorado Rockies suck. Nobody, it isn't like if I said, take the player you want off the Colorado Rockies. It isn't like, could Herman Marquez potentially help the Yankees? Maybe, but you wouldn't feel that much better if he showed up tomorrow,
Ryan
right? Like,
McMahon, I feel bad about Ryan McMahon.
yeah, he's not as good a player as you think. And uh, so there's that, and it's also left-handed. That isn't what they need right now. They need a right-handed bat. But so there's that. So the Rockies, the White Sox traded Crochet. They traded Eric Fetty at the deadline last year.
Mhm.
They're not really sitting with that. The Marlins have Alcantara, and the question will be like he missed all of last year with Tommy John. Does he have to pitch a month or two to kind of like remind everyone, yeah, you got to give the farm if you want this guy? Because not only is he good, if he's good, he's on a great team-friendly contract for this year and 2 more after it. So, trust me, the Orioles are gonna have more and the Red Sox are gonna have more prospects to trade than the Yankees if that actually becomes available at some point. I will name a team that the Yankees have been associated a lot with in spring training, and again, I know this will do nothing if I tell my aggregate asshole friends not to do anything,
Mhm.
because I've not heard anything. I've not heard anything. But if you looked at the Cardinals and said, who's a team that has a lot of veteran starters and probably wouldn't care the day they traded them, it would be St. Louis. Now, one of them is Sonny Gray, who has a complete no trade clause and is not going to waive it to come back to the Yankees. Eric Fetty is a free agent at the end of the year who I doubt the Cardinals will re sign. So the question is between today and July 31st, Eric Fetty would be high up on my list if you were telling me make a list of people you think will be traded. Eric Fetty's probably a pretty good number 3, 4 kind of starter. He had a very good year coming back from Korea last year. And if he were on the Yankees today, like Hill, you'd feel like, okay, there's a guy they could send out every 5 days who has a chance to pitch 5 or 6 innings at a pretty decent level and give them a chance to win. So if Eric Fetty were actually available today, which I don't know if he is or he isn't. But if he is, again, do the Yankees go to the front of their line with their prospect group? That would be a guy. I don't think they'd be interested in Mayo Michaelis, who's making $18 million and is a free agent at the end of the year. The stuff probably doesn't play in the AL East, whatever. I'm going to throw out another name. It's a name that will probably make you gasp a little bit, but I wonder if Steven Matz would actually help them right now because Steven Matz, does he is he a good placeholder? Like the Cardinals would probably say, here he is, like to get the 12 million off their books. Maybe would they take Trent Grisham and make it 7 million off their books by taking the 5? I don't know. But like they've tried to trade him for like 2 years, maybe even longer than that. It seems like the day they signed him, they started trying to trade him, and they haven't. And there's a reason for that. He's been disappointing, but he does have good stuff. And the question is, could he fill in as like would you want to have him as the fifth starter, send Will Warren to the minors so you feel like you have some depth?
Mhm.
And the one thing that Matz has done well for the last 3 years is when he's been forced to the bullpen, he's been a good lefty out of the bullpen. So, like the day Hill comes back or the day you trade for someone else, Matz goes to the bullpen and you have some depth. but the question is, like, that's the kind of guy you might be able to get now. And is that a guy you believe every 5 days could give you 15 to 18 outs and four or fewer runs? I don't know. The answer is probably no, because if it was yes, he probably would have been traded before now, and he hasn't been. But that's probably what's available because I know
What
Yankee
about
fans have
so
their
well, I
eye
was
on
gonna,
someone. Like, I don't think the Padres are going to trade Dylan Cease or Michael
yeah,
King right
I,
now.
I wouldn't so I wouldn't even go in the trade market. Like free agency though, I'm looking at guys like Lance Lynn, Kyle
But there,
Gibson.
the you saw Lance Lynn when he was better and a
Right.
Yankee. That was like 4 or 5 years ago. That's not and we saw what happens when you start late to the Blake Snells, the Jordan Montgomery, who are closer to their prime than these guys. I, I don't know. I mean, I guess do you want to throw $3 million at Kyle? I don't even know if he'd accept it. I don't know what he's holding out for. But like, would would you be okay doing that? The question is, when will Kyle, if you signed them today, when would they be ready? I know they're all going to say they're throwing,
Hmm.
but that's like, I'm playing, pickup basketball and tomorrow I'm playing in the NBA. No, you're not. No, you're not. Like the speed, everything changes. So I'm not exactly sure when they'd be ready. The fact that they've lingered in the marketplace means that 30 teams are telling them something, not just the
Wow.
Yankees. So the the Orioles know Kyle Gibson well, for example.
Yeah.
They're down a couple of starter. They're down a starter. Uh, a couple if you want to include Kyle Bradish, who will miss the season after his Tommy John surgery. So I don't know that those are answers. I don't know. But they're
Yeah.
probably
No.
just going to answer as Steven Matz. The one thing I was pointing out about Matz is he has a secondary value, which is like, I don't think you could count on Tyler Matzik. He hasn't stayed healthy, whatever. It's a little bit of a pipe dream. Maybe he helps, maybe he doesn't. You probably would like a second lefty at some point. And I actually think Matz might be able to give you second lefty in the bullpen if you like placeholder today. And again, 4.5 ERA placeholder. I'm talking about, does he every 5 days give a team a chance to win? I don't know. I think if he did, he would have been traded already. But that's the point, is that's the kind of player who I can imagine getting traded
Gotcha.
in late March
Yeah.
as opposed to late July. When, the Blue Jays are going to look up in late July, my suspicion, and not be very good. And then suddenly Kevin Gossman, Chris Bassett, Jose Barrios, those kind of guys might be available if they're not good. So I think the Yankees should be able to hold on between now and mid-July. You think that? But I just it's hard to make trades now. You don't see big trades this time of year.
Yeah, it's certainly tough. Joel, I want to finish up with Giancarlo Stanton. Listen, we heard his comments. Finally spoke. He's due to get 3 rounds of PRP injections in his elbows. He called his elbow injuries, you can classify them as, quote, severe or significant. Uh, he also said, yeah, I could get surgery and it'd be season ending surgery. We know that the elbows were there problem for him in the playoffs. It was due to his adjustment in batting in I believe in his swing style and what he said. Joel, I gotta be honest with you, man. If the Yankees knew that he had elbow problems back in the playoffs last year and he was dealing with it and he still had an incredible playoff performance, did they do enough to address that issue? Because now it's rearing its ugly head again to start this year, where you really don't know if Giancarlo Stanton's going to play for you at all this year, just because of how significant he's saying these elbows injuries are.
Yeah. The question is, in some way you're asking the question, how incompetent are the Yankees? And I can't answer that because I don't have the medicals. I don't know. Like, I don't know what they knew when they knew it. I'm sure they knew he was nursing these in October. Uh, I'm sure they knew that he had shut down most of his workouts in the off season. Is the first protocol rest for tennis elbow? Because surgery is dire. Like, nobody wants to be cut, like, just willy-nilly. Hey, we'll cut you November 1st, so maybe you can play July 1st, kind of thing. So I'm sure that there's probably a protocol for this. But I mean, I hate to say this, but if it wasn't the elbows, wouldn't it just be his calf? If it wasn't his calf, wouldn't it be his knees? Like, Giancarlo Stanton's just not going to play a lot of baseball games. That's the reality of it, I wrote a column early last season, again asking the question, like, is it just a date when they have to kind of release the player kind of thing? And then he got great in the postseason, and I had a lot of people come back at me, "Oh, this guy was trying to release him," and whatever, which wasn't exactly what the column was about. But again, it's best to be the biggest fucking asshole online you could be, so that's how you succeed. But it leads to the bigger question, which was like he has had big Octobers, but for most of the other time as a Yankee, he's been hurt
Mm.
and he's been a kind of roster clogging, base running clogging detriment to what they've done. And it isn't like the Yankees wouldn't spend the 25 million a year on something else. So it's like it's not like Giancarlo Stanton or nothing. It's Giancarlo Stanton and I would believe like this year, Jock Peterson as their DH, something like that. And so when you get involved in these 10-year deals, A-Rod, him, 9 years with Cole, eventually you're going to pay the piper. And when you ask, how did the Yankees get to 76 wins this year if that's where they're going to end up? Well, you have now 36 million dead of Cole. You might have 25 million dead of Stanton. You probably have 15 million dead of LeMahieu. You're paying 10 million to Aaron Hicks not to play baseball this year. That's 36, that's
Jesus
61, that's
Christ.
71, if I did the math real quick, that's $86 million for those 4 players, or more than the Pirates will spend trying to make something out of Paul Skeens this year. And trust me, they're a bigger problem than the Yankees or the Dodgers. Spending is a team not spending around Paul Skeens. But you get the point. Is like it's a little bit like the Mets last year. And the Mets overcame a ton of dead money. You know, half of Scherzer's contract was still on the boards. Verlander's contract was still on the boards. Not Brian, James McCann's $10 million was still on their thing. The Mets had like 60, 70 million in debt last year. Steve Cohen had it up at about 340 and was able, so they had like kind of like really like a 265, 70, $75 million payroll, and they survived it. The Yankees currently have a lot of players they pay a lot of money to. As we know, Hal Steinbrenner wants to kind of keep it tight to right around that in that 300 to 310 area until the trade deadline. And I suspect he's holding back a little to do something at 5, 7, 8 million to get it into the 315 to 320 area, would be my suspicion, is where he wants to end the season. Uh, but they're going to have to overcome dead money, which again is why pre-arbitration guys think about the value of Hill last year for $800,000. Like, what's the value of Wells? Do they get something out of Ben Rice and JC Escara, guys who, you can imagine maybe helping them during the year? You forget the great contracts they did. Luke Weaver was 2 million last year. He's 2.5 million this year. That he outperformed it last year. Will he outperform it this year? Tim Hill pitched like one of the better lefty relievers in baseball. They brought him back for what, like 2, 3 million. Does he do it? So they've got to make some money on the back end. Like they know they're getting nothing for about $80 million on their payroll.
That's
Nothing,
crazy. That is
right? For
crazy.
for 80. But again, I will say go look at the Dodgers, and they're countering it by having a $400 million payroll. The Dodgers are going to begin the season with 10 pitchers on the injured list. 10 pitchers on the injured list. 10. And that doesn't account Ohtani, who isn't pitching to open the season, but obviously the DH and is going to hit. They have 10, and they're at 400 million. Again, we could have a long discussion. Should Hal Steinbrenner have a $400 million payroll to make sure that like there's always an answer when there's not? Even Steve Cohen doesn't have that, right? Now got close a couple of years ago. So they've got a lot of dead money, which means the guys who are performing, like Judge made 40 million last year. He outperformed 40 million,
Oh, absolutely.
right? He was the MVP. If he's they kind of need him to be the MVP again.
Yes.
They need Bellinger to be worth 25 million. That's what they're paying, 27.5, whatever they're paying him this year. They need Paul Goldschmidt to be worth 12 and a half. They need Jazz Chisholm to perform. Jazz Chisholm's a guy who probably because of arbitration, I don't even know what his number is. Is it like 8, 9, 10, well, whatever? But whatever it is, Jazz Chisholm has 20-20 and maybe 30-30 skills. If he gets there,
He's making 5.8 million this year.
okay, like he's a guy who actually, if he's worth like 3 or 4 WAR, that's a 30 to 40 million dollar player.
Yes.
Can he do that? Like they didn't have him all of last year. Jazz Chisholm is talented enough to be a down ballot MVP guy. Like if you at the end of the season, if Jazz Chisholm finished ninth for MVP by hitting in Yankee Stadium all year, would you be shocked?
I would be. Absolutely.
You would? Okay.
Yeah.
I
Like I
I
haven't
I
seen that player.
I wouldn't do well. Like I think there's a potential for a 4 or 5 WAR player there playing in that stadium. I'm not a big believer in the player, but talent-wise, I mean, if he had a 30-30 season for a team that won a division, he's going to get some down ballot MVP votes,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, no, that 100% if he has a 30-30 season, no doubt.
Right. And can he? He's skilled enough to. Will he? I don't know. Will Anthony Volpe have a 720 OPS season?
That's the key to this thing. Besides the guys you highlighted in the rotation, Joel, it's those three youngsters that you've so eloquently pointed out all spring training. Volpe, Dominguez, Wells. What do those three do for this lineup? Because that is what's going to ultimately affect how this offense goes and where this team goes. Because you
And
need your young players to step up and produce.
and I think I left a relatively low bar of 50 homers, 50 steals, and a 720 OPS combined for those three guys. Like they should probably hope for more. But if it was 50-50, 720, I think they'd be fine.
Yeah. Joel, thank you for this therapy session. That was a
Yes.
lot. Yankees fans I know are going to be in the comments. Let us know what you think. Joel laying us out for how this didn't sugarcoat it, like you said, laying this all out for us this
So
2025 year.
can I add one thing before
Of
we go?
course. Of
Right.
course.
Like sometimes we forget there's an actual human being attached to this. Like I I think Gerrit Cole loves to pitch. I think it's as much a part of him as like I love to report. It's like I love doing that. It's like my favorite thing is like talk to people and learn and find out things I didn't know at the beginning of the day and see if I could put it together well. Like I love doing it. And if that were taken away from me, when I still feel like I want to do it and I could do it, that would hurt. And Garrett Cole isn't going to be able to pitch a major league game for about 18 months. And I get it. You're a Yankee fan. Yeah, he makes a lot of money, whatever. Like he loves to pitch. And he now isn't going to do that. Probably for another time, we'll have a discussion. What does that do for his Hall of Fame candidacy? If he's about to miss a season and a half, I know people will say, oh, he'll start it. He just completed his age 33 season. You know what was Johan Santana's last year? His age 33 season. He was on the Hall of Fame ballot for 1 year and fell off. You know what Felix Hernandez's last season was? Age 33 season. He just got 20% of the vote when you need 75 to get in. I think Gerrit Cole will probably be fine. He's competitive. On the other hand, Justin Verlander at 38 or 39 had Tommy John surgery, missed the whole season, and won the AL Cy Young the
Yep.
next year.
He did.
Like, I wouldn't bet against Gerrit Cole, whose pitching brain and fervor to do it well is at a high level. But there is a human being attached to that, like with Luis Hill, like with John Carlos Stanton. I think John Carlos Stanton showed again last October. Like, he actually likes the bright lights in big city. He actually wants to play big games. I think he's desperate to get to 500 homers. I think he's desperate to win a World Series because I don't think he has got a shot at the Hall of Fame. Not me saying it, but probably he thinks if I got a shot at this to be immortal, I got to get to 500 and win a championship. And there are human beings attached to this. DJ LeMahieu, as we know, when you Yankee fan, me reporter, like he burned to play baseball. And like people go, why is he so miserable? And I'm like, well, he wasn't Mr. Perky on his best day, but imagine if you took away the thing that was his gas pedal that got him out of bed every day, something he was really good at at a time where he's still a relatively young man in his 30s, thinking, is this really it? So I just wanted to kind of point out that there are human beings attached to Grayson Rodriguez's injury, George Kirby's injury, all the Met injuries now, Francisco Alvarez, who kinda can't get it started and going, and it looks like he's gonna be a good player, but he can't kinda get it going, and every once in a while, you gotta be like, "This isn't the fucking Matrix." Like, these are real people attached to it, and just having had really a lot of conversations, and a lot of deep conversations about pitching with Gerrit Cole. He is an artist who loves to paint, and he is not going to get to paint for a while, and I've got to imagine just how gut-wrenching that is for him.
Well said, Joel. There's a huge mental aspect into what these guys have to go through, specifically when this is the hardest part of their careers, you could argue, dealing with a significant injury to miss a lot of time like this. Uh, and I, as a Yankees fan, have enjoyed every single moment of Gerrit Cole. I don't take for granted what we've gotten to see from him and witness. That's why it hurts so much, even more. I know for him as a human being, it hurts even more. But as a fan, it just stinks because you want to root for a guy like that. You want him to be out there and be that ace that we love and watching,
And
seeing every single day.
and look, I'll throw in this selfishly, Ryan, is like, if I was just comparing it even to the Mets clubhouse, the Yankees clubhouse isn't the easiest clubhouse to work in the world. Uh, Not a lot of great talkers. They're all media trained beyond control. They've all figured out how to stay out of the locker until like the last 2 minutes reporters are allowed in there. They're really very sneaky, crafty, so smart. But Garrett Cole is available and smart. And his loss is a loss to reporters who cover the team, and therefore people who love the Yankees or love baseball and want to know how the wheel works better. Garrett Cole's a guy who helps reporters understand how the wheel works better, and I assume he'll be around. Like I can imagine him becoming like the co-pitching coach this year. That's how much he loves it. Like where he just throws himself into, like he hasn't won a World Series either, right? The Astros got close, the Yankees got close. He hasn't won it. I could see him saying, "Hey, I want to be part of it if we get there," and I could see him being a huge part of their game planning, where he doesn't have to think about anything but his rehab and not pitching every 5 days. I don't think he'll go into hibernation. I think he'll be a behind the scenes factor for the Yankees. I think the way his baseball brain worked, if you told me he was sitting in the front office during the trade deadline telling Brian Cashman, "Yeah, that guy's a tough guy to get out. You should go get him. He's a good hitter. He's better than he's shown. He'd be great for us," kind of thing, wouldn't surprise me. But he won't be in the grind. So it's a little different repertorial thing when you're dealing with a player who isn't in the grind. But yeah, it's not it's not good for the Yankees, and it's not good for the coverage of the Yankees, that he'll, be gone.
Well said, Joel. That's a show. That's an episode. We're looking forward to speak to you again real soon here, Joel. The Yankees again, to recap, have lost Gerrit Cole for the season, who will undergo Tommy John surgery on Tuesday, March 11th. And we'll see how this goes for the season as they get ready to get started here, as spring training is coming close to an end. Joel, as always, thank you for all your insight. Appreciate you as always for coming on with us, man.
All right, all the best, Ryan. Let's do it again next week.
Yes, sir.